about that Heisenberg fella?
High school chemistry teacher.
You're shitting me, really?
Hey guys, Kiwi here, warning of spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul to Season 6, Episode 11. In this video, I'll be breaking down the scene between Saul and Mike during the Breaking Bad timeline, along with Saul approaching Walt's school that he worked at as a chemistry teacher. Like the video if you end up enjoying it, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter for more Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad updates. With that being said, let's jump into the breakdown.
Walter Hartwell White, chemistry teacher over at J.P. Wynn, working with a former student, current meth head, one Jesse Pinkman.
About 3/4 of the way through Better Call Saul episode 611, we're given yet another missing scene to Breaking Bad, similar to what El Camino did in its flashbacks. This time we see Mike and Saul having a meeting in Saul's office, and this missing scene takes place near the end of Season 2 Episode 8 of Breaking Bad, after Walt and Jesse kidnap Saul, but before Saul confronts Walt in his classroom at the end of the episode. The scene first starts with Saul's Bluetooth earbud vibrating on his desk, implying he has a call. This shot is actually one of the shots that we got from a Season 6 teaser trailer. Saul answers the call to reveal it's Francesca, checking to see if Saul has taken all of his vitamin pills for the day. This parallels the Gene timeline where Gene tells the Mark with cancer that he used to take a handful of pills every day. While Saul speaks to Francesca, we see that he's using a swing master, which is a form of passive exercise. It stimulates muscle contractions, boosts oxygen in the blood, and loosens the spine for greater overall health, according to Google. Saul's swing master is actually the focus of one of Better Call Saul's opening sequences, which has 10 different shots throughout episodes 1 to 10 for each season. That is until Season 6 changed the format with episodes 610 to 613. Anyways, due to the Season 6 Bluetooth teaser, we wondered for a while who'd be walking through that door, and in episode 611 we find out that it's Mike, who's returning to Saul to give him information that Saul hired him for as a PI. Mike walks into Saul using his swing master, which parallels Season 3 Episode 13 of Breaking Bad Full Measure, when Mike walks in on Saul using his swing master as well. There's actually a handful of parallels between both of these scenes. In the 611 scene, Mike sits down to wait for Saul to finish using the swing master, saying how he won't talk to Saul while he's using whatever that is. In Season 3 Episode 13 of Breaking Bad, Mike goes to Saul to learn about Jesse Pinkman's whereabouts and says that the sooner Saul tells him, the sooner he can get back to whatever that is.
I'm not gonna talk to you while you're on whatever that is. I need your full attention, Saul. Jesse Pinkman, current whereabouts. The sooner you tell me, the sooner you can get back to whatever the hell this is exactly.
This shows that Mike has walked in on Saul using the swing master many times, but never bothers to care enough to learn what it is or why Saul uses it. The Breaking Bad Season 3 Episode 13 scene also references the theme of attorney-client privilege, which we hear multiple times throughout the 611 Walt and Jesse cameo, along with the original Season 2 Episode 8 Breaking Bad episode that these 611 scenes happen in.
Now, when I say I'm looking for Pinkman, we both know why, don't we? And you pretending otherwise only wastes my time and serves to annoy me.
Saul originally won't give up Jesse's location in 313 due to knowing that Mike wants the location to kill Jesse, saying how there are rules to being a lawyer, bringing up the attorney-client privilege.
There are rules to this lawyer thing.
Is that right?
Yeah, attorney-client privilege. I mean, that's a big one. That's something I provide for you. If I give up Pinkman, well, then you're going to be asking, old Saul gives him up pretty easy. What's to keep him from giving me up?
Mike then threatens Saul multiple times in order to give up Jesse's location, first by threatening to leave Saul in a hole in the desert, which reminds me of not only Jimmy and Mike's adventures through the desert in Better Call Saul 508, but also the transition in 611 showing Gene in that unmarked grave.
You see? So then where's the trust?
I trust the hole in the desert I'd leave you in.
Yeah, that's an argument.
Along with implying that he'll break both of Saul's legs.
Don't make me beat you till your legs don't work.
Better Call Saul has taught us that this wasn't the first time Mike has threatened Saul, since the 611 scene shows Mike threatening Saul as well, saying how if Saul doesn't stop using the swing master, Mike's either gonna leave or put his foot through Saul's skull.
You know, LBJ used to have his underlings give him reports while he was on the shitter.
Well, either I'm gonna leave, or I'm gonna put my foot in your skull.
Fine.
I'd also like to point out that in Season 3 Episode 13, Saul tries telling Mike that he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he told Mike where Jesse was, to which Mike calls his bluff by advancing on Saul, causing Saul to run behind his desk and take out a notepad with Jesse's location on it, followed by leaving the office for Mike to look at it himself.
Now tell me where to find him. You know it's the right thing.
I can't tell you, Mike, right? If I was to tell you, well, I couldn't live with myself. I'm sorry.
This always implied that Mike knew that Saul was BSing due to already having corrupt morals, but now we know why due to Better Call Saul elaborating on their character dynamic. Mike knows that Saul has done worse, such as setting up Howard to tear down his career, resulting in him unintentionally getting killed by Lalo. During Mike's cleanup of Howard in the apartment, you can tell that Mike was not impressed by everything that Jimmy and Kim did to Howard. I love how Better Call Saul emphasizes the character dynamic between characters in Breaking Bad, such as Saul and Mike, which gives Breaking Bad just so much more rewatchability due to moments like this. But back to the 6-11 scene. Saul recommends that Mike should get a swing master himself, but as we know, Mike isn't interested, as shown by the expression on his face while Saul says this. Saul gets up and puts on his blazer, implying to Mike that he now has his full attention. Mike starts listing off information about various targets that Saul needs for his cases. Mike proves that a woman is cheating for Saul to use against her, along with confirming that one of Saul's clients, who's a bus driver, really does have a broken neck, to which Saul rejoices in saying how it makes his life much easier, obviously not caring about the pain that this client is actually in. Mike then explains how he scouted out a man named Lasky from Indianapolis and that he's trustworthy if Saul ever needs someone in the future who can keep their mouth shut. Saul then asks about Heisenberg, and Mike tells him how Heisenberg's real name is Walter Hartwell White and that he's a chemistry teacher over at JP Wynn and that his partner Jesse Pinkman is a former student of his. Mike then tells Saul how Walt has stage 3A lung cancer and that he's in treatment but that it doesn't look good. Saul realizes that that's why Walt is constantly coughing every time he sees him.
What else about the teacher?
He has lung cancer.
Jesus. That's why he can't quit with the coughing.
Mike tells Saul to stay away from Walt even if he's going to live. Mike calls Walt a complete amateur, but Saul implies that he sees potential in Walt and that Saul thinks how he can mold Walt into an extremely profitable client. Mike refutes that if the cancer doesn't get him, that it'll be the cops or a bullet to the head. Saul asks Mike
Is that your appraisal?
or the opinion of Gus, who Saul calls
He who shall not be named says about him.
in reference to Voldemort from the Harry Potter movies. Mike tells Saul that Gus hasn't said anything about Walt yet, as Walt is
Small potatoes.
for Gus's standards. Saul says that he understands Mike's concern, but that he has a gut feeling about Walt and doesn't want to shrug off the opportunity. Saul admits that Walt has top-of-the-line product due to his criminal clients talking so highly about it. Saul says how with the right management, Walt can work wonders, but Mike cuts him off, comparing Walt to a Betamax.
Good product, top of the line. Experts said it was better than a VHS. Turned out to be a complete waste of time and money.
Mike then tells Saul one final time to
Let it go.
to which Saul pretends to pander to Mike's opinion, saying how a guy with that kind of mustache probably doesn't make very good life choices. Saul then changes the subject back to one of his previous targets that he had Mike gather intel on, but then the camera zooms in on Saul while Mike starts listing off details, implying that Saul is zoning out as he can't stop thinking about Walt, and then the scene ends. Before we move on to the next scene of Saul going to JP Wynn, there's a few more details I wanted to discuss. The first is Mike's sunglasses. Why is he wearing these? This is in reference to Mike's first appearance in Breaking Bad, which is Season 2, Episode 13, when Mike goes to clean up Jane's death scene after she OD'd. Mike wore sunglasses during his first scene, which turned out to be the only time that he ever wore them throughout the entirety of Breaking Bad. This is most likely because Mike was originally only supposed to show up the one time in Season 2, Episode 13 as a substitute for Saul, who was originally supposed to clean up Jane's crime scene himself, but couldn't due to Bob Odenkirk being busy filming his episode cameo on How I Met Your Mother. The Breaking Bad creators liked Jonathan Banks playing Mike so much that they decided to have him return as a recurring character, eventually becoming a main character. Since Mike's first Breaking Bad appearance was only meant to use Mike as a temporary character, the creators clearly hadn't worked out the kinks of his character and must have decided to scrap the sunglasses for future appearances. Now, since it became so odd that Mike wore those sunglasses only once during his first appearance, the creators must have decided to show Mike with the sunglasses for the 6-11 scene, which further implies that this is Mike before his first Breaking Bad appearance in Season 2, Episode 13. I actually love how we see Mike during the Breaking Bad timeline, but before his Breaking Bad debut, as it's something that I've really wanted to see for a while, and I even predicted it during my huge Better Call Saul, Walt, and Jesse cameo theories video. Next up, why would Mike work for Saul? As we know, Mike is making complete bank from working with Gus, probably making just as much, if not more, than the original $10,000 a week deal that he worked out with Gus back in 2004 during Better Call Saul Season 3, when Mike wanted Gus to launder his money for him. During Better Call Saul Season 4, Mike refused to work work with Jimmy on the Hummel heist even though the job sounded good due to the fact that Mike was making so much money now working with Gus. Mike also refused to work with Jimmy as his PI in season 5 due to healing in Mexico, causing Jimmy and Kim to hire Mr. X as a PI, aka Stephen Oggs. So if Mike denied working for Jimmy multiple times in the past after working out a deal with Gus, why would he start working for Saul again during the Breaking Bad timeline? The reason is due to the fact that since Saul Goodman acquired Caldera's coded criminal contact book, he's now at the heart of the criminal world within Albuquerque, since he has effectively taken over the job of Caldera from Better Call Saul, the vet with criminal connections. Mike, who used to take jobs from Caldera, is now working with Saul due to realizing how much of an asset Saul can be in regards to the criminal underworld in Albuquerque. Mike may not only be working with Saul for his own benefit, but it's possible that Gus also realizes the usefulness of having Saul as an asset, so he keeps Mike on Saul's good side in case they ever need any information that Saul may have. This could also be why Saul is aware of who Mike is working for, even if Mike usually keeps Saul in the dark when it comes to Gus. So even though Mike advised against working with Walt, Saul goes against Mike's advice and ends up confronting Walt at the end of Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8. During Better Call Saul 611, we can see the moment when Saul arrives at JP Wynn, the high school that Walt works at as a chemistry teacher. Saul arrives just as school has ended for the day and exits his car in the parking lot while also walking past Walt's Pontiac Aztec that we know all too well from Breaking Bad. Saul takes one last pause before opening the door to the high school as he knows that it may not be a good idea, but he does it anyways. This is a trademark that Jimmy/Saul does whenever he knows that he's about to make a bad decision. He does this in Season 3 right before he humiliates Irene at bingo, along with in Season 3 before he humiliates Chuck in court. There are so many other examples of it, with those just being the first two that come to mind. In this case, Saul deciding to work with Walt is what results in everything crashing down around him in Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul shows the intricate criminal underworld of Albuquerque being formed in regards to Saul being at the center of it as a criminal lawyer, along with Mike working with Gus and his criminal enterprise. Breaking Bad shows how once Walt is introduced into the picture, he slowly crumbles and destroys everything that Saul, Mike, and Gus worked so hard to orchestrate. Walt is the cog that breaks the machine for all the worst reasons and all the worst ways. This is yet another reason why Better Call Saul complements Breaking Bad so well, because it sets up the whole world building of all the pieces that are in place once Breaking Bad starts, along with how they are all destroyed by the time Breaking Bad ends. Saul opening the door to the high school to speak to Walt also parallels Gene breaking into the house of the mark of the guy who has cancer at the end of episode 611, implying that although they're both clearly bad ideas, he does it anyways, even though he was advised against both situations respectively. In the Breaking Bad timeline, Mike advised Saul not to speak with Walt, and in the Gene timeline, both Jeff and Buddy advised Gene to not go after the guy with cancer. Now at the end of Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8, we see Saul walk into Walt's class after school, continuing the scene from 611. Saul is jokingly surprised to see Walt is actually a teacher, to which Walt is genuinely startled that Saul was able to track him down. Walt asks Saul how he found him, to which Saul says that he should be much harder to find than he actually is.
How did you find me?
We should talk about that. It should be much, much harder for people to track you down. My PI charged me for 3 hours, so I seriously doubt it took him more than one.
Saul goes on to say that his PI charged him for 3 hours, so he seriously doubts that it took him more than 1 hour to find him. We now of course know that Mike was the PI that Saul was talking about in Breaking Bad due to the 611 scene. Considering that Saul uses Mike to set up a meeting between Walt and Gus in Breaking Bad, I wonder what Mike had to say and why he even agreed to it after Mike specifically told Saul to leave Walt alone. Walt asked Saul if him coming into his class was blackmail, but Saul reminds Walt that he is his lawyer, and that everything said between them is privileged, and that Saul isn't into shaking people down for blackmail money. As I discussed earlier, the attorney-client privilege is mentioned many times throughout the 611 scenes, along with Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 and even Season 3 Episode 13.
You want attorney-client privilege, don't you?
Attorney-client privilege. Anything you say to me is totally privileged. Attorney-client privilege.
It's a trick that Jimmy learned from Kim back in the beginning of Better Call Saul Season 3.
I'm your lawyer now. If anyone asks me what I know, we have confidentiality.
Why do we need confidentiality?
Jimmy, what did you say to Chuck?
And we see him use it in Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 to first convince Walt and Jesse to cooperate when they kidnap him out in the desert. Saul then brings it up during the 611 missing scene of them in the RV afterwards, along with at the end of Season 2 Episode 8 of Breaking Bad while talking to Walt in his classroom in order to once again convince him to work with him, this time by implying that he's not a threat. I like how Saul first used this out in the desert to try and make Walt and Jesse not a threat to him, and now he's using it in Walt's classroom to make himself not feel like a threat to Walt. Although Saul uses this to his advantage many times. As we know from season 3 episode 13 of Breaking Bad, he breaks that privilege by giving Mike Jesse's location when Mike threatens him.
But who's to say I didn't write the address down in my day planner or on a scratched piece of paper somewhere? Who's to say I didn't write down a location strictly for my own professional use? Do not touch anything on my desk. I'm gonna leave the room, make myself a Nescafe.
Anyways, as I said, the reason why Saul went to speak with Walt in his classroom is to convince Walt to work with him as his client, saying how if you want to make more money and keep the money you make, better call Saul. The episode then ends with Saul walking out of the classroom, leaving Walt standing there alone, still stunned by being caught so off guard due to his criminal life now clashing with his normal life. I love these Breaking Bad missing scenes that we saw in Better Call Saul 611, as they supplement the Breaking Bad story just that much more. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today. If you're new to the channel, just haven't yet already, subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay updated on when I post new content on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Check out my Patreon and give a super thanks to help support the channel financially. But most importantly, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
So if you want to make more money and keep the money that you make, better call Saul. My real name's McGill. Yeah, the Jew thing I just do for the homeboys. They all want a pipe-hitting member of the tribe, so to speak. I digress.